Okay, so I hope to not ever do that again. Kind of split. I wanted this to be one video, and I don't want to split it up into this two kind of video explanation for one part of the novel. But I really wanted to get this next part right because I think Laurence, who is, and I've learned some of the names, Sir Richard and Lady Naylor's nephew. And Sir Richard and Lady Naylor are the owners of the house. So Laurence is going to be different. I mean, Laurence brings out initially, well, Lois describes Laurence as an intellectual, and I think right out of the gate, when you're in a modernist kind of novel, you're not just going to say that. You're not going to say this person is intellectual and then give them some kind of dumb thing to say, right? So you're gonna say this guy's an intellectual. Listen to him, and I think that's what Bowen is doing at this point. Um, he's an intellectual. He loves food. Kind of getting to a character description now for some reason. Um, Lois continues, aside from being an intellectual and having no emotional life, and we can talk about that a lot. Laurence should spend. It's surprising to Lois that Laurence should spend so much time in talking and thinking about food. And that's interesting because I have a lot of like nutritional kind of ideas about that, but Laurence is focused on different things than everybody else. I think is what Bowen is getting at is he's not worried about the status quo or impressing people or the environment. He is worried about himself. And when he focuses on food, he he really provides for himself, and that's a focus in his section. Um, is that he needs to provide for himself rather than everyone else, and Laurence, I know, is going to be a very key point that I want to focus on in this novel from here on out. A couple other notes I have is Lois and Laurence kind of talk about how close the rooms are where they're talking and communicating, and they're talking about the guests. And Laurence says something like, always listening. Like, aren't you scared that everyone is always listening? And I think being an intellectual, Laurence knows that he's challenging other people's perception. And that's a really intriguing point because as we set up to this point, everyone is contributing to a facade, and I think Laurence is going to point out that those facades for these people because he needs to, and there isn't. I feel like he's going to get a lot of backlash, but to kind of compare it to something contemporary is to always listen is in this novel, in this kind of text, is so important, but you're scared of being thought of. I mean, you're scared of being evaluated by your peers. Like, where am I in this social class? Where am I in this family hierarchy? Where am I in comparison to these visitors that I've known slash not known before? And they question even meeting these people. I mean, have you met someone if you don't remember them? I mean, have you really met them? Like, if you're a child and they meet you, they have a much different perception than you about each other, about you and them. So that's a interesting thing. And to bring it to in contemporary kind of terms, the movie Bird Box. And I won't talk about the actual literary text because I have no idea. But from the Netflix movie, Bird Box is grounded in the idea that you listen. It's grounded. To survive, you have to listen. And I think that's an interesting dynamic to bring to this is how do we listen? I mean, what do we listen to? What are we afraid of people hearing about us? What are we afraid to say in case someone hears about from us. Um, so I would really like to look into sound, what people say, and dialogue. Dialogue is so telling. Like this video says, is if you say someone's an intellectual in this kind of novel, you are labeled as an intellectual, and there's a purpose for your labeling. Lois brings up kind of an interesting kind of take. Is she thinks about people being married and sleeping, and what kind of communication that would lead to. And like, quote, how long it took one sleeping with the same person every night to outlive the temptation to talk well into the morning, unquote. And that took a turn at the end that I did not expect it to take. It is really kind of a positive thing. They're really happy about talking to each other, or in Lois' perception, that they would be happy. They wouldn't be miserable spending time into the night talking about difficult things. And with nostalgia and kind of the future looking in modernist texts, and this one specifically, already in the 23 pages, we're never living in the present. We're always worried about what has happened, what is going to happen, and that sacrifices the moment. And that's always been my kind of argument with nostalgia, or against nostalgia, is it destroys the present moment. Lois then begins to talk about what would that turn into, that communication at the end of the night. Would it turn into hate for each other? I mean, I don't think she does not explicitly say these things, but I that's where it would turn to, in my perspective, is if she's questioning these ideas, it could turn into hate. It could turn into actual realization of love, whatever that is. But it could turn into many different things. And the question I wrote down in my notes is, do things that don't have resistance. So, like, if she talks about how if no one told you to stop talking, would you continue to talk? I mean, would you, at night when you're a kid at nap time or going to bed, how bad you want to stay up, how bad kids want to stay up, and either when you're an adult, it kind of loses its luster staying awake because of the resistance. Like, do we only want to do things because we are told not to do them, or we have someone telling us not to do them? I mean, then that's kind of the question that really Lois gets at the end of the 23 pages. Laurence does show he's intellectual. All I have in this notes are Laurence knew the answer, and you should probably go just look that up. I don't think it's that important, but Laurence shows his expertise, or cockiness, intellectualness. Wow, this is really out of order. Okay, so when Lois is talking about being heard, when Laurence says, "Are you not afraid of someone hearing you?" Lois knows that no one's going to be able to hear her. Like, she's done this before. She knows the house. That's an interesting aspect. She knows the house, but panic is beyond one. Is, quote, panic is beyond one, unquote. And that's, I mean, what a true statement that is. Like, anxiety, depression, anything that's hard, that on the psychology of an individual is beyond one. And that's, especially with Lois and Laurence, that could be where they panic without in the novel. If they panic, like I said, I mean, I'm only 23 pages in, so, but panic is beyond one. I mean, that's a quote to think about. I wish I could read my own handwriting. I talk about Bowen simply writing about everything around the people rather than what the people are, and that's not entirely true. But in modernist novels and this time period, that it I think Bowen really wants to express what's going on, and that's why she's a modernist writer. She wants to point out basic things that mean everything. Naming. All right, guys. So that's it. Yeah, like I said, I'll put the link